Okay, today I'm going to show you how to make a little monster. And he's pretty frog-like, so we're going to go with frog. But I make these, once you get comfortable making them, you can turn them into all different sorts of little critters. This one is even a rattle. And that's pretty easy to do too. I make them with a couple of pinch pots. I use a bowl to make my pinch pots. If you're good at making pinch pots, you just go ahead and go for that. If you're more comfortable throwing, then go ahead and throw something. It kind of doesn't matter. The main part, my clay's getting stubborn here. The main thing is that we want to create an air armature where our form that we're going to paddle into shape holds the air inside of it, so it gives us some resistance while we're forming the piece. And what I do is I just take a piece of clay, get it into kind of a little slab that's about the size of the bowl I'm going to use. I use plastic because it makes it really easy to release. And we don't really care about any of the texture that the plastic is going to leave on here because we're going to be paddling it anyway. So I just push it into there, and then I use my hands to kind of bring up the walls. I want it to come up over the edge of the bowl and create kind of a lip at the top of the bowl, so that it's just easier for me to attach. So I've got kind of a lip all the way around. And then I want to smooth out the inside with a rib. And that just gives it a nice thing, but it also, if you decide to make it into a rattle, it makes the walls a little more even and they get a better sound. I like a nice stiff rib. I find that some of the softer ribs just don't do it inside this bowl shape. And so I just form it up like that, smooth it out a little bit, turn it over. And you can use any different size bowl. It doesn't even have to be particularly round. That's just what I'm going for. So there's my half bowl. And through the magic of television, I have another half bowl right here. So I'm going to make two of these halves. And when I get them done, I'm going to score them. And then I don't use slip. You can use slip if you're into it, but I find that the slip gets all over the clay, and when you go to slap it, it gets pretty messy. So I use vinegar. There's a science for how vinegar holds clay together. Unfortunately, I don't know that. You don't brush it on, you just kind of dab it into there. If you notice, there's a hole in this one. I'm not too worried about that right now, because while you're paddling it, while you're putting it together, you may have a hole. And we can fix that. It's not a big deal. So when I get these two pieces slipped up, I'm just going to join them together. I like to pinch the clay together all the way around. I'm starting to seal the air inside of the form, and that's going to create my armature and help me hold its shape while I paddle it and then start forming it. But this is an awful lot of clay, and so I want to trim a little bit of it off just to neaten it. And I find that a cheese slicer works really good for me, but of course you can use whatever you happen to have laying around. And I just go around, and I don't trim it all the way to the edge. I leave a little bit out. Scrap clay, we're going to use that later. And then I'm just going to gently go and blend this a little bit. I'm being extra careful here because I do have that hole in the bottom there. And I'm going to fix that in just a minute. And then we'll start beating on this thing. So with that hole there, I can just take a piece of that clay I just trimmed off and make a little slab that I'm going to put over it. If your clay is nice and wet, you don't have to use any slip or vinegar or whatever, but you can. and I just cover it up and real gently go around and join it. And it's not even, I'm not even being super careful about joining it. Now it's time to bead on this thing a little bit. My favorite tool is a cedar shim, and you can get these at Home Depot or any lumber yard. You usually get them in a pack of 20 to 25 for $3 or $4. You can use a paddle, you can use a piece of wood, you can use a wooden spoon if you want to. This is just what I like. And one of the reasons I like them is because they're rough, the clay doesn't stick to them. And that's really important. That's where you're going to tear your clay, is when you start, is when your paddle gets wet. So that's why I like these. If you get a shim, make sure you get wooden ones and not plastic ones. They make both. And first thing I'm going to do is go around and start sealing that seam and just paddling it down until when this side gets wet, I can just turn that over. And again, I just really don't want my clay to stick to this paddle. And you can see the more I paddle it, the seam is starting to disappear. And that's telling me that it's joined. Once I get that seam all nice and joined, I'm starting to trap my air in there, and I'm going to paddle all the way around this thing and kind of compress the clay and wake it up and do all those things that happen when we beat clay.
Cathi, what kind of clay are you using?
This is Laguna's Redstone. It's a cone 5 clay. It's somewhat new to me, but I really like working with it. It's nice to throw. It's nice to hand build with, and I'm really enjoying using it. I really love red clay. Okay, now I'm going to work on his face. My favorite tool are these little, they're called dragon's eyes, and you can get them in a set from, I've seen them in a lot of pottery supply places, and I just like the look. But you could use any sort of little eye thing that you want to.
Can you hold it still and bring it a little closer, just so people can see? Okay.
And this one's easy. I just take that, figure out where I want his eyes to be, and you just rock it back and forth. You want to be careful that you don't go all the way through the clay, because we're trying to hold that air in. And there's one eye. The other eye I like to do is a variation on the same thing, and that's just taking a little bead of clay, and I throw it down on my surface, and it gives it kind of a half moon thing. And then I can put it on, and these are fun. And then I go back with the dragon's eye and rock it into there, and that attaches the clay to the main body. So what it does then is it gives me an eyelid that I can push in and narrow, or I can just use to give a little more expression. And then I give him pupils, again, being careful not to pierce the clay. I want him looking off to the side. So I just be careful with that, where I put and there he's got his eyes. Now I'm going to do his nose, and I just take the point of a tool and put it in, and I just lift it up. It gives him a little nose. And then his mouth, if he's going to be grumpy, he wants a big mouth, and this is my favorite tool. But you can use a spoon, you can use a flexible rib, you can use anything that's going to give you kind of a curved impression into the clay. And all I'm going to do is just figure out about where I want his big mouth to be and just rock that tool all the way across. And that's given him a pretty good mouth right there. Maybe bring it a little more over if we want him to be grumpy. And then I like to take the back end of this tool, and if I just tuck it into the corner and push down a little bit, it gives him a little extra frown. It's also a great place to put a cigarette if you want your critter to be smoking. And there's his expression. Now we're going to go on to doing the feet.
Go ahead.
Okay, so now I'm going to give him his feet, and that's the last step. Because he's a frog, I want his front feet out wide and his back feet kind of narrow. And again, this wonderful little cone-shaped tool. I'm going to pierce through the clay, so at this point I want to be careful that I don't apply too much pressure to the form, or else I'll collapse it. So I'm just going to go in and put little holes where his legs are gonna go. I like the back ones to kind of face forward, makes them a little more believable. And then I'm gonna come in and just put a dab of vinegar. Again, you could use slip, you could use water, however you wanna do that. Now I'm gonna add his legs. And the way I make the legs is I just take a little roll of clay for each one, and I roll it into a cone shape. I make the front legs a little bigger than the back legs, but it's your monster. You can make them however you want. So those are the legs. I have some coils, little coils that we're gonna add just to keep those in place. And we're just gonna pop these legs on. So the front legs will just squish in like that. Get in there, like that. Back legs go in there. And before I do anything else, I'm just gonna add a little coil to the inside. You could go all the way around, just to attach his legs well to him. If you don't, sometimes they'll pop out, and nobody likes that. So put the coils on and smooth them out. Again, my little cone tool works really good to just sort of join those two pieces together. And you can come back later and kind of refine that. At this point, you just want them well attached so you can work on them. You could come back. I like a little foam paintbrush. Is really good for smoothing these out. All right. There he is. Now we need to form his legs and his feet and give him a little attitude. Maybe you want his front feet facing inwards, as frogs do. So what we're gonna do now is we want a little shape like this. This is how our feet are gonna look. And it's really easy to do. I just want to caution you not to squish down so far that you go all the way through the clay. You want it to just give the impression of his toes. And to do that, we're just gonna take and bend him a little bit. And I do this when it's on the frog instead of beforehand, because it really plants his feet on the ground and makes him level and he doesn't rock. I'm just gonna take my little cone tool and put an indentation in the middle and one on either side. And that's all we're gonna do. So I'm gonna come in and do that here. I'm gonna do it here. And then I'll do his back legs. Sometimes I do the back legs with a little narrower one. And whoops. Bam, bam. One last thing to do before you clean him up. At this point, he's all full of air now, and the air has no way to escape. I like to come in with a needle tool, and I just pierce through the pupils, and then through the nostril holes. And then the last thing I do is I turn him upside down, and I just paddle his belly in a little bit, so that as he dries, he doesn't rock on that. And that's it. And so this is the finished guy. You can come back and add stamps, add patterns, decorate him if you feel like it, add embellishments. That's up to you. These are some of the ways that I have finished these. I usually, it's just kind of my little thing. I put a little underglaze on their eyes and then a little clear glaze over that. And then this one here, these were all three fired at cone 5. This guy just has an iron oxide wash on him. Very simple, but very effective. This guy has a crater glaze on him. And these were both bisked and then fired again. This guy was single fired. While the clay was green, I went ahead and put on the underglazes, did whatever I was gonna do to get him looking the way I wanted him. And then he was single fired, which is my typical way of firing. And that's just pretty much adding a bisque fire and a glaze fire together. You just have to be a little careful. Those are just some ideas. I'm betting everyone out there has a new idea for how to do these.